Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on Soul School. Well, Jeff's running behind. He might make it, he might not. And that's just the way it goes in the world of, business. And he's got a very intense job and it takes him far and wide. And so he'll be with us if he can, and he'll hop right in if he arrives before the end of the show. But otherwise, you're stuck with me for the next hour. And I know I don't look like the average school marm anymore. I know. But still, I'm an old lady and I got a few things to say. You're so sweet, Melissa. Bill, send Melissa a check, please, out of the, like the joint account. Okay, thanks. We are facing a lot in the world right now. So class is in session, and I've learned as much this week as any of you have. It is this dual role that I play between the teacher and the student. And the one thing that I want to remind people, I'm on Facebook. I have a fan page on Facebook, and the banner says, I did not come to teach you. I came to love you. Love will teach you. And I don't know who wrote it. I don't know where it came from. All I know is that I have claimed it as my own, and it is my message to the world to be the beacon of hope on the hill. Be the light you seek. Be the change that you wish to see in the world. So tonight, let me put on my cheaters because, and anybody that's watching this that wants quite a show, a World Awakening that comes on right after Soul School, is going to be the ultimate legal chat group tonight. I'm going to have 10 of us from all over the country, and we're all close friends and love each other dearly. And we're going to have a conversation that all of you are invited to attend. Soul School is it's going to be, the phrase, the wisdom of the ages. Well, I changed it a little bit and changed it to the wisdom of the aged. And so, all of us being women of a certain age have developed a certain attitude, a certain opinion. And, we don't all think alike. Of course not. I mean, we're, very much individuals, but we can speak together in a way that I think is inspiring. And in a couple of weeks, most of us will be together in Houghton Lake, Michigan, for an amazing event. So everybody's coming on tonight and has something that they want to share. So I hope that you join us for that at 10 o'clock. Okay, tonight's show, class really, session, episode, is based on this condensed syllabus, as it were. And it's the description. And in case you hadn't read it yet, I'll read it to you because it's a precursor to everything else that I have to say. In the midst of turmoil, be still long enough to remember who you are and the power innately possessed by human beings in touch with our emotions at all times. Discernment is the key to self-awareness and knowledge. The only true measure of a society is how it collectively cares for the most vulnerable, those unable to care for themselves. What are our core values? What are our convictions? What matters most? How will this time, this era, be defined in retrospect? History is a harsh judge. Our superpower is love. Empathy is ultimately our guide, our moral compass. First find your balance, then find your voice. And so tonight's title is A Moral Imperative. And I do believe that we are there now, that we are at a place where we need to consider what that is. Now, in a country of 330 plus million people, I think it is ludicrous to say that we all have the exact same value system. We don't. There are some people who are completely, totally locked in to what they consider to be their value system based exclusively on their religious beliefs. Fine. There are people who develop their own value system or their belief system. I've often said you can be an atheist and still have a belief system, because atheism is a belief that God does not exist. So, that said, I think it is incumbent upon us to spend some time thinking about what we, who we are, what we are as a society. I was part of the big march in Atlanta on April 5th, and I would say probably 1 in 3 of the posters that I saw, of the thousands and thousands of protest posters that I saw, had something to do with Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. Now, those 3 programs that have been, Social Security has been a part of, it's generational. It's been around for more than 90 years. So we have to look at what matters to us. I personally have a great deal of disgust for the richest man in the world taking USAID apart. Less than 1% of our yearly budget that helped millions of people around the world. And suddenly those people are gone. They are fired. They don't have a place to go. Some of them don't make enough money to even come back to the United States. They have to stay where they are. I've been doing my research on the people of USAID. And I would say that I share their values and their concerns for the world. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there is a very large outbreak of Ebola. And those of us Americans that were there to help contain that, treat it, and keep it in one place where it could be managed and brought to an end. There's nobody there to do that anymore. And as one broadcaster said today, we are 2 plane flights away from an Ebola outbreak in the United States because of this. Because the doctors and the nurses and the staff and the clinics and the everything is gone. Babies are dying. HIV patients are dying. They no longer can get their medication. This was something that the United States did for the world, and it was retracted instantly, like a cat retracts its claws, with the sweep of a Sharpie across a piece of paper. It was over. I have issues with that. I have issues with an administration that shows blatant contempt for our court system. When somebody is illegally and immorally removed from this country and thrown into the worst jail in the world, who never, according to everyone who knows him, never did anything wrong. He just happened to be someone that had a tattoo. I mean, this is the ultimate in racial profiling that's going on. 100,000 foreign students that would most likely come get their degrees, open businesses, work in our tech sector, work in our country, become citizens of this country that left wherever they came from in the world to come and get the very best education that they could. Thought that they were in a country where there was this thing called freedom of speech and that they could express their themselves. That doesn't mean I have to agree with everything that they express. You know, all of this was over Gaza and the Palestinians and the attack on Israel, which was something beyond atrocious. The blowback from it is also something beyond atrocious. And so two things can be true at the same time. And this is what war looks like. War looks like Gaza. War looks like Ukraine. War looks like Sudan. War looks like Yemen. And on and on. I could spend the rest of this hour talking to you about where these atrocities are occurring, who is responsible for them, and why. But if you're watching Soul School, chances are really good you already know all of this. And so I would be nothing but redundant. You already know. What I am here to talk about is the time that we take individually to examine ourselves and go into a place where we can find comfort in our own soul, a place where we can discern what matters to us, what our personal value system is based on. And I think that that is an individual thing, regardless of your religious beliefs, regardless of your philosophical beliefs, regardless of your family structure, regardless of all of those things. Within each of us is part of what I refer to as the oversoul. Now, some would call that God, some would call that prime creator, divine mind, you know, the consciousness, the Christ consciousness that each one of us tries to tap into and touch if we are Christian, to be touched by God. But in every major liturgical work ever written, there is one through line, and that is some form, some variation of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would wish others to do unto you. Or as I like to say, do unto others as though you are the others. Because to someone, you are the others. And again, allow me to reiterate, and thank you for your patience, but allow me to reiterate that we are each a source of light. We are each and every one of us God consciousness in this form, in this vessel. And each one of us decides how we want to live, who we want in our lives, how we can help other people, how we can be of service, how we can be of use on this planet for the amount of time that we inhabit it. And if we take the time to consider the important role that each and every one of us plays, and start to come to an understanding of our collective energy, our collective mind, our collective soul. When we come to understand and appreciate the realization of our oneness, that we are all the human race, that every animal that walks on this planet has as much of a right to be here as we do. When we understand that caring for this planet is caring for ourselves and everything else that lives on it, perhaps we will be less inclined to pollute our oceans and our rivers, less inclined to clog our air with chemicals, more inclined to find a better way. And this is something that I'm going to bring up again, if I remember, in A World Awakening tonight. But one of my friends who I invited to join me on the show was really struggling with depression. And that's up to her if she wants to disclose that or not during the broadcast. But she was very sad and very dispirited, disheartened, feeling hopeless and despondent. And I don't know where it came from, but all of a sudden I have this knack for being able to say exactly the right thing at the right time. I don't know where it comes from. I just do. I think it's them. But she said, I feel like we are taking, as a society, that we are taking a giant step backward. And when she said that, I paused for a moment and I thought about it. And I had this vision of these strong, beautiful women all lined up at the starting line at the Olympics. And they were about to run the 100-meter dash. And they got into position. And the last thing they do before each one of them takes off like a shot, the last thing they do is take one giant step backward. And they plant their foot on that incredible lined rink that they're on, whatever you call it. Somebody tell me what it's called. It's gone. But you know what I'm talking about. And they're all lined up and they take one giant step back. And then they use that foot to project themselves forward. It is their PowerPoint. It is their position that they assume because it gives them balance. It gives their body balance. And women's center of gravity is lower than a man's. And so their foot goes back a little farther so that they can establish that balance before they take off running. And so that was the example that I used for her as a metaphor for what we're all doing right now. And maybe as a society, we are taking a giant step backward, but that's only so that we can spring forward into a sprint, so that we will have the balance and the composure and the strength to thrust ourselves into the future and determine what that future is going to look like. And you all know that I was born a feminist. As the eldest of 5 girls, not once in our lifetime did any of us ever hear from either of our parents that we couldn't do something because we were a girl. We never heard, ever, that we couldn't do something that we wanted to do. And in fact, it was interesting because I'm sure he's passed away by now, but my high school counselor was named Mr. Griffin. And I had a meeting with him and he said, I think I was in the 10th grade. And he said, well, what do you want to do with your future? And he knew that I was in college prep and, I had great teachers. I had wonderful students that I learned from the students as much as I learned from the teacher. I mean, really bright kids that I went to school with. And I said to him, that I thought that I might want to be a pilot. And he said, "Oh, you can't do that. You're a girl." And I was like, "What?" What? It's like 1974, okay? You're telling me I can't be a pilot because I'm a girl? So I kind of shut down. I remember I didn't really have very much more to say to him. And our meeting was abbreviated. And I went back to my classroom, and then I went home, and I told my parents that Mr. Griffin said that I couldn't be a pilot because I was a girl. And the next day, my parents brought me to school and met with him as I was going to homeroom. And before my first class started, I had a new counselor, a woman, an older woman, who assured me that I could be and do anything that I wanted to do. What I really wanted to do was be a veterinarian, but I couldn't handle all the death and the sadness that comes with that. I couldn't. I worked for one summer in a vet's office, and I said, no, this would not be it for me. So instead, I just rescue every animal that comes down the pike and claim them as my own. Hi, Peanut. Are you resting comfortably? She is. Peanut's resting comfortably. So what we're facing now, I think, is a moral imperative. I think that that's really what everything comes down to. Who are we? Who are we as a society? And who gets to determine that when they're speaking for us, using our tax money to make decisions that we would never make? It feels very intrusive, and it feels counterintuitive, and it feels painful to me to know that some innocent people were deported that should not have been, and now nobody wants to bring them back to the country and say, "Oh, we can't. Yes, you can. One phone call on a plane, done. You know it. We know it. We all know it. Due process of law. And when I see contempt of court coming from people who represent us, the people, in a court of law, and deliberately mislead a judge and withhold information and evidence and claim they'll get back to the judge. That's not how it works. That's not ever been how it works. And I don't want us to become inured to this. I don't want the flooding of the zone to become so overwhelming that we forget who we are, that we shut down, that we stop engaging or even acknowledging what is happening. And what is happening in this country is a deliberate conversion. It's like somebody forcing you, coming to you as a Christian and saying, as they did in the Crusades, either you're going to be a Christian or off with your head. And believe me, anybody that died that way during the Crusades got off really easy. Do your homework, kids. Absolutely gruesome. In the name of Jesus Christ. In the name of Jesus Christ. Millions and millions of people were massacred. But somebody to come to you and say, you can't be a Jew anymore. You have to be a Christian. If you are not a Christian, if you do not swear your allegiance to Jesus Christ, then you must die. Well, we're getting perilously close to a place where the expulsion of students, the expulsion of migrants, the expulsion of green card holders who might have written something or said something that someone at the top of this administration found offensive. In a land of free speech where we're allowed to burn our own flag legally, and students all over this country are scrambling to take down articles that they've written in support of the Palestinians and using the word genocide to describe what has happened in Gaza. If you can think of a better word than genocide for what's happening in Gaza, bring it on. Tell me the word. I'll integrate it into my vocabulary. In the interim, I can't think of a better word to describe what is happening in Gaza. I can't think of a better word to describe what is happening in Ukraine. I can't think of a better word to describe what is happening in Yemen and in Sudan and in countless other countries. We have been through this over and over and over again. So why don't we take a few moments to self-reflect on what our value system is and what of it we wish to retain? Do we as a society wish to retain the judiciary, the court system, the rule of law? Do we wish to retain that? Is that integrated into our value system? Is it integrated into our value system, each personally, that we think that we should do our very best to help others? Now, if somebody comes into this country and they commit crimes and they are arrested and they are adjudicated and they are jailed and they came into this country illegally, bye-bye. You must leave. You cannot stay here. You cannot just run roughshod over our society. We've got enough problems. We don't need more. I get that. Somebody might say, ooh, that's a very conservative take on things. It's common sense. If your neighbor's an axe murderer, you don't invite him in for dinner. Common sense. But the chainsaw that I have seen in 90 days taken to agencies and administrations that serve the people of this country that we all paid into. I got my first job when I was 15. That was my summer job at a veterinary clinic that broke my heart and changed my mind about what I wanted to do with my future. But I've been paying into that my whole life. And I now know three or four people, women my age, that have yet to receive their March Social Security payment and are frantic and want to know where the money is and have gone to their banks and have gone to the Social Security Administration. One had to drive an hour and a half one way to go and stand in line for 3 hours to get a little strip of paper that gave her an appointment to go back in 3 weeks so she could actually sit down with a human being. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. It's not the way the system is supposed to work, and what I am so concerned about, it is being deliberately destroyed from within. It is being dismantled from within. I am very upset about the cybersecurity being unraveled, kind of, opening the doors to cyber attacks from known sworn enemies that will do anything to uproot our system of government, get into our electrical grid, get into our water supplies, get into, absolute upheaval could ensue because of the mass firings that are happening from the top down in agencies. It's a massive, massive brain drain. To use fraud and abuse, I'm not saying there isn't any. Find it without killing the baby, without killing what is so good about what we have societally. We have, in the last 2 weeks, watched our bank accounts, our 401ks, when the bond market starts caving, we're in trouble. We need to pay attention, pay attention, pay attention to what is happening. Stand up and find your voice. I beg you, find your voice so that when the time comes that we have passed through this era of uncertainty and instability and fear, you can look back on it and say, I stood for what was right. I stood tall for what was right. What is good about America? What is good about our country? When so many other countries now loathe us, we have upset the apple cart worldwide. Worldwide. This isn't over. It's just beginning. And unless someone in a position of power stands up with us collectively and says, no, this is not how we do things here. There is such a thing as the rule of law, and it applies to everyone. I've had a lot of people, I talk about this with, I know lots of people. And I very frequently hear, I'm afraid we're losing our democracy. And I don't mean to sound brutal about this, but the fact is that the day that the Supreme Court came down with the immunity ruling and basically let Trump off the hook for everything and anything that he might do in the future, someone with a really tall ladder needed to climb up the front of the building and chisel off the words, equal justice under the law no longer applies in this country. And we're going to have to do something to change that. We are going to have to do something. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But if we pay attention, if we watch what's happening, and if we speak up in defiance of tyranny, we will win this fight, because good conquers evil. Love conquers fear. It might not happen on the timeline that we desire, but it will happen. As Martin Luther King said, the arc of justice. It happens slowly, but it does happen. And if we are to pursue a more perfect union, there's nothing perfect about us. There's nothing perfect about any human being. Not one. Gandhi came pretty close. Jesus was way cool. But for the most part, we are all flawed. If we decide what matters to us, if we decide that we each can make this world a better place, that if each one of us decides every day when we get up, if part of our intention of stepping into this new day is to be of service, to help someone in some way or another. Sometimes my days are quiet and I'll get up and I'll make a cup of coffee early. And then when my sister wakes up, the dogs hear her before I do. And when they start to go running toward her room, I go in and I make her a cup of coffee so that it's waiting for her when she comes out of her room. And she so appreciates that tiny little gesture that took me a few seconds to do for her. And she smiles and says, "Good morning, sissy." And she reaches into the dog treats, and each one of them get a little tiny cookie for being so good and escorting her into the kitchen. And that's how most of my days begin, with just a little act of kindness. And it's such a great example to set for myself every day, to begin the day by meeting the needs of others. First thing, as soon as I open my eyes, out the door with the dogs, out the door with the bird food, out the door with enough seeds so that the pilfering chickens can have their fair share, out the door so that everybody can begin their day anew, feeling that sense of relief, that sense of breakfast. And then one of our neighbors' roosters will show up and he'll jump up on the fence and crow, do his cock-a-doodle-doo at the top of his lungs. And I just look at him and I say, "You're welcome. You're welcome." Now, I don't know if he's saying thank you or not. I'm going to assume he's saying thank you. And then the mama chicken shows up with all the biddies. And so more seed goes down. And then I make my cup of coffee. And so each day of my life that I value more now than I ever have begins with a gesture and an act of kindness. And I sometimes contemplate what the world would be like if everyone approached each new day that way. I think that we have to, each in our own way, set an example, because you never know whose life you are touching or how it helped them or how it changed them. And I could tell you stories for hours about incidents that have occurred, strangers that I have run into, people that I found needed help and I stepped in. But I don't want this to be about me or my stories. And I certainly don't want to ever make it sound like, that I'm somehow patting myself on the back. I just strive to be a good human being. That's all. But I don't know if I've told this incident that happened a few weeks ago to my sister, but she was out doing grocery shopping and she was really struggling with her leg that most of you know was broken in 2015 and a terribly botched surgery, and she's disabled. But she went to do the shopping because she won't let me go, because she doesn't want me to be around a lot of people, because I can't pick up something that they might have with a compromised immune system as it is. So she insists on going and doing the shopping. And she was struggling, but she found her way and she got out and she put the stuff in the car and she returned the cart. And she sat down in the car and she had her big red Ford that has blind spots. And so she always turns her whole body around one way and turns her whole body around the other way to make sure that nobody is behind her. And she started to back out. and there was a rap on the window, and she panicked and hit the brake and opened her door, and there was an elderly woman there that had a bunch of fresh cut flowers. And Chris did not know who she was, had never seen her before. And she handed that bunch of flowers to Christine and said, "These are for you. These are for you." And Chris was like, "Are you sure? Do we know each other?" And the woman just put them back in her hands as she was holding them out, looking at them, and said, "These are for you." And I did a show, I think, a few weeks ago about earth angels. And I think I told that story then, but it bears repeating. It was just an act of kindness. I'm sure that woman was in that store and saw my sister struggling and thought in that moment, as she stood in the florist section, what can I do for her to make her day better? And so she bought a bunch of fresh flowers and gave them to my sister. And I swear to God, I've never seen a bundle of flowers last as long as those did, for weeks in the middle of our dining room table. It was like they were divine flowers. They just refused to die. They were so beautiful. And then we cut all the tips off and we dried them to make them into potpourri so that we would have them, keep them. But it was the gesture. It was that act of kindness that blew Christine's mind. She didn't even know how to respond. She's like, nobody's ever done anything like this for me before. And even though I did not say it, my response was, well, that's a damn shame that nobody has ever done anything like that for you before. We always mark birthdays and we always mark the holidays, and there's always gifts at Christmas and there's always gifts at Easter. And, sometimes there's the occasional, oh, I found this for you. It'll look so great on you. There's that. But for a stranger who never met her before to have a sense of her struggle, of a woman who'd probably been through some things of her own to get where she was in life, which was probably, Christine said, probably in her 80s. And for her to extend herself in that random act was what is so beautiful about humanity. And each and every one of us has the ability to reach out and help another person, and reach out and acknowledge another person. It doesn't hurt any of us, not any of us, to say hello to someone or hold the door for someone who's older than we are, or who maybe is in a wheelchair, or just obviously needs some help of some kind. It's so easy to just walk away and go do your own thing and not think about it again. But in what way does ignoring someone in need grow your soul? It doesn't. It doesn't make a difference to them either way if they are ignored and unseen, because you didn't make the effort. So when we don't make the effort, life goes on. Everybody keeps moving in their own direction. And it's an opportunity wasted. I once had somebody who tried to give me a very expensive gift. And I was uncomfortable with receiving something that was obviously so costly. But it was a gift from the heart. And when I said, oh, I can't accept this, it's too much. I can't accept this. She started to cry. And she said, by you rejecting what I chose to give to you, your rejection of that robs you of the gift, and it robs me as the giver. And I said, give that thing to me right now. And it was a gold bracelet. It was beautiful. I still have it. That was like 40 years ago. And I still wear it. And every time I do, I think of her. And I thanked her profusely for the absolutely lovely gift that I received. And I never again refused to take a gift because I thought that it was more valuable than the love that it was given with. Not ever again. So think about that. Think about that. When we give at Christmas, for instance, give of ourselves, that's an expression of our personal value system. What do we value of the holiday, of the people that we share it with? How much time and effort and energy do you put into choosing exactly the right thing for Aunt Emily or Uncle Frank? You know, that you take the time to think, what would they want? What would they need? What would they enjoy? What do they love? You know, one of them's into Stover's candies and the other one would like a new piece to his train set. You know, sometimes it's the smallest gesture that makes the biggest difference in someone's life. So, you know, if this really is soul school, if this earth is where we learn to love, truly love each other and the creatures of the earth and the planet itself, this living, breathing thing called earth, and cherish it and honor it, acknowledge each other and this home that we all share. We all share. When we come gradually, and it will be gradual, it's how human beings learn, incrementally. But I do believe, and I hope in the course of my lifetime, that I see a real movement toward an understanding of divine wonder, an understanding that each and every one of us is a living, breathing expression of the divine, that we are the way the Creator witnesses its own creation. None of us has any of the answers to these enormous questions. None of us do. No matter how learned, no matter how deeply you've been steeped in philosophy, me, my whole life, I can't tell you that I have the answers. This isn't the kind of classroom where you walk in and you learn something and then you take the test. The tests come first. The lessons come later. And we are all in the middle of the test of our lives right now. What is our value system? What is our moral imperative? Now, some of us obviously are amoral, have no value system. And some of those people are in positions of extreme power and calling an awful lot of shots that an awful lot of us disagree with. But in a peaceful, forward momentum way, we can take that giant step back and catapult ourselves forward into the future and make our presence known and make our opinions known and make our values known. There is no such thing as a uniform, collective American value system. Each and every single one of us must evaluate that for ourselves and then put it into practice. And the more we do that, the more we actively love each other, the more we tap in to our absolute superpower, that thing that makes us phenomenal. And when we actively love and embrace and acknowledge and enjoy each other as human beings, when we get past all the bullshit and we see each other, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Look into the eyes of someone that you just held the door for and make that connection. Even if it's a split second, make that connection. And then maybe say, great outfit. Have a wonderful day. Lousy weather. Good to be inside shopping with you. You know, there are 1,000 ways to say everything, anything. Choose the most pleasant, the most lovely. And even if you don't have a bundle of flowers in your arms to hand off to a stranger, do it with your eyes. I love you all. Have a lovely evening. Join me in a few minutes for a world awakening with the girls. It's going to be like a hen party. Have a wonderful night. And always remember, be the beacon of hope on the hill. Be the light. Be the change you wish to see in this world. Class dismissed.